So that we may start. My name is Nyaradzai Gumbonranda. I am the African Union Goodwill Ambassador on Ending Child Marriage, and also the founder and chief executive of Rosaria Memorial Trust. Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, leaders, colleagues, friends, it's such an honor to see a house full at 4:45 on a Friday. Can we just give a big applause for ourselves? This evening, I'm Zimbabwean, so I'm like tonight, because it's like midnight in my country. I have to get used to the New York time. This evening, in this session, we are focusing on making social protection, public service infrastructure inclusive and meaningful for women and for girls. We have an extraordinary panel with us to walk us through the conversation that we are having, knowing that the negotiations are going on, and also considering that what is also important is the implementation. We know that the theme is critical for Africa. And this evening we are going to have a deeper reflection on what are the dimensions that we need to explore within the objectives that we have set for this session, relating to identifying the biases and the challenges, highlighting some of the good practices that we have. But indeed, we really need to look at the synergies. The synergies of social protection, public service, and sustainable infrastructure. Identifying them is not enough without concrete proposals of therefore what? Therefore what in terms of empowerment and in terms of advancing gender equality. To walk us through the discussion this afternoon, we have Madam Gawanas, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Special Advisor for Africa, who is going to set the context and give us some opening statements. We have Mr. Mohamed Pratt, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Chair of the African Union is Egypt. Congratulations, and thank you for being here. We have Madam and Dr. Pumzile Mlambo Nuka, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director for UN Women. Madam Bita Diop, we are expecting Madam Bita Diop to join us, who is the African Union Special Envoy of the Chairperson on Women, Peace and Security, and Madam Toyin Adeniji, Executive Director of the Bank of Industry of Nigeria. And indeed, Mr. Kai Sua, the Permanent Representative of Finland to the United Nations. Let's welcome them with a big applause. My sister, Madam Gawanas, over to you.
Am I allowed to stand?
You are allowed to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my sister, the moderator. We were together, when was it? Not that long ago, in Addis Ababa.
At the summit.
At the summit. I wish to recognize the protocol and just to really welcome all of you to the site event co-organized with our partners. And indeed to say that I'm really pleased to see this full house. and the full house is just an indication of the topic that we will be discussing. And that is in the context of the theme, but more importantly, a focus on Africa, African women and African girls. And so I want to express my immense gratitude to our core partners, UN Women, the African Union Commission, the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt and the African Union Chair, the government of Finland, the United Nations Global Compact and the United Nations Department for Global Communications for their strong collaboration in the organization of the side event. I cannot speak about social protection without speaking about human rights, social justice, and human dignity. In fact, combating social development challenges, including poverty, inequality, and social exclusion, will require the adoption of robust, multi-sectoral social protection systems, which are essential in protecting citizens from risk, vulnerabilities, and aim at ensuring a minimum standard of living of all our people. The challenges also bring into sharp focus the issues of inequity, inequality, and social exclusion. They touch on the very core of our society, the human dignity, worth, and rights of those most vulnerable and marginalized. Fighting poverty is fundamental about promoting human rights, human dignity, and social justice, thereby ensuring that people have access to food, to water, shelter, clothing, and so on. I stated on many occasions that definitions of poverty should be dynamic and keep up with factors such as changing social, economic, political, and environmental conditions. I can't help but quote my minister, the Namibian Minister of Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare, when he describes poverty, and he says, in Namibia you are poor if you go hungry to bed or eat from the dump sites. If you cannot afford a decent house, if you share drinking water from a well with livestock, when you still rely on nearby bushes when nature calls, when you do not have access to decent health services or education services, that's when you know that you are poor. And so our topic this afternoon is closely aligned with the overall priority theme for CSW 63. And so we ask ourselves, what is different? What will this meeting do differently from the other side meetings that have taken place? Obviously, the difference is simple, that we are talking about Africa, that we will be talking about an African narrative, that we will be talking about the experiences, not all of them necessarily bad experiences, but also the best practices that African women and girls can share with you. So I'm here to represent a positive narrative of Africa. It's not just a continent of conflict and disease, it's a continent where people show resilience, where women hold up their communities and making and eking a living from whatever challenges are there. So we want to talk about the Africa we want. And the Africa we want is definitely going to be different than the Africa we have today. But we have to start today to get to the Africa we want. And so on the continental level, as will be discussed later by my sister who has just arrived, Madame Binte Diop, our special envoy on women, peace and security of the African Union. And she will be obviously introduced, but I just thought since I was talking about the African Union and the many instruments that have been adopted at that level. But really what we are talking about here is the interlinkages between social protection as we know it, and we talk about contributory and non-contributory social protection systems. But all these must be linked to access to basic services. Because I can tell you that many orphans today, or many children that are born and are basically dumped with grandparents, will not have grown to the adults that they are had those grandparents not have access to social protection. Many children today survive on the basis of old age pensions that their parents receive or grants that they receive as children. And so access to social protection also means access to the basic services where we talk about education, health, water, sanitation, electricity, etc. And then the question of financing and accountability for gender responsive social protection systems. And I always want to believe when people always say, where will we get money for social protection, or where will we get money for social policies? I always say to myself that for the longest of time, I was never made or convinced that because a country's economic growth is high, that therefore the people's living standards are also high. So I cannot be made to believe that there is no money to make the lives of people just a little bit better. We have corruption, we have illicit financial flows. If we can curb those, I'm sure we will have enough domestic resources to put to the use and to protect our women and girls. So having said that, I think I would really love to, since I was merely asked to set the context, and I hope that I have done that, but that the panelists will definitely do justice to the different aspects that they have been asked to do. All I can say at this stage is that next month or in May, we will have our next Africa Dialogue Series, which will be focused on the AU theme, and that will also coincide with the celebration of Africa Day in May. So be on the lookout. We will definitely invite all of you to join us. And again, a warm welcome this afternoon. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and join OSAA and our co-organizers to this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for really taking me back to the life and the values and the perspectives that we need to reposition for Africa. Your emphasis that the conversation around the theme of CSW is not just about access, it's about rights. It's about the right to, and not just access to. It's about recognizing that Africa is rich, and therefore we need to redefine the conversation around resources in a way that we're able to address the issues. And lastly, the intersections of public service, infrastructure, and social protection. In fact, I was wondering, why is social protection first instead of infrastructure? I'm just thinking aloud. But anyway, this is where we come to the chair. We know that Egypt is our chair of the African Union, Mr. Mohamed Prak. I had the opportunity to be in Cairo for the ministerial pre-CSW, and under the able leadership of the minister from DRC as chair of the Bureau for Women. I was excited, of course, navigating traffic. I was excited to learn that Africa has best practices. Can you share with us the complementarities that you see looking at the Africa common position that evolved out of the discussions in Cairo, and therefore how do you see the CSW youth in promoting the issues of gender justice and empowerment of women on the continent? Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon to all. And it's a real pleasure to have at the very end of the first week of this CSW 63 such an audience. I've been in this very room a couple of times this week for some side events, and only the first few rows had people in them. This, at the very end of the week, with all of you in there, it's a real pleasure, and it's a real honor for me in particular. I was not planning to be the speaker today, so bear with me, but it's a real pleasure that I have this opportunity to deliver some remarks at this extremely important side event. You know, as a prelude perhaps, just now, as you mentioned, Madam Moderator, social protection and infrastructure. But in fact, infrastructure is not only about the roads, it's not only about the dams. Infrastructure is to enable the fabric to create sustainable development. And what I mean by the fabric, it's this interlinkage between the social protection systems, the education, with the hard infrastructure. So in fact, this, for us, a theme that sits well. Now, let me share some of the points. Already, our dear moderator, Ms. Gombanzvada, had mentioned the ministerial pre-CSW that was held in Egypt. That was a very, very important meeting because it reflected on many of the themes that are central to Africa. So let me start by saying that not only was the ministerial meeting of importance, at least to us in Egypt, but the fact that we assumed in early February the chairmanship of the African Union in 2019, and of course the issues that we discussed today were central to our endeavors. We are also joining in trying to implement home, to do, as we often say, to walk the talk. And only recently we've had the highest percentage of women ministers in Egypt's cabinet, in the history of Egypt's cabinet. 25% of cabinet members in Egypt are women. We know that there is still a long way to go. However, these are also important elements, and they found their expressions in the priorities that we had identified in the chairmanship of the African Union for 2019. So, Madam Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, social protection, public services, and sustainable infrastructure. Clearly, these are three of the major components of sustainable development efforts in general. And they have a special role to play, in particular, when it comes to achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. They are also interlinked components, since public services need sustainable infrastructure and both lead to social protection. When it comes to Africa, a lot has been done recently to attain these three components, achieve progress along these three components. Not only are there important milestones for Africa's development, particularly the Agenda 2063 to achieve the Africa we want, but also African governments have been giving them special attention. With regard to the crucial component heading towards the issues that you wanted to raise, Madam Moderator, for achieving the Africa we want, there has been direct effect on attaining public services and social protection, which will definitely trickle down to women empowerment. namely sustainable infrastructure. We hold a firm belief in the importance and necessity of upgrading infrastructure as a means to achieve comprehensive sustainable development. We also believe that once Africa has its infrastructure needs, it will be able to utilize its enormous capital, this being human capital as well as the hard infrastructure. Continental interconnectivity will come close to the circle and enable Africa to achieve a lot of the production capacity to meet its own needs. Among the issues that we highlighted during the chairmanship, we presented an emphasis on continental infrastructure in particular. We will cooperate with all partners to upgrade this infrastructure and ensure that the opportunity cost is met substantially, providing concrete services in the most remote areas, not only focusing on the big urban centers or where there are important production facilities, but likewise to go into areas where there is a large need for these infrastructures. On the national level, there needs to be an emphasis that is on infrastructure that is gender responsive and also caters to the social protection needs of African citizens, with special emphasis on women empowerment. On this particular front, Africa has taken a number of strides to achieve gender parity. The key role of women in realizing the Africa we want is recognized. Gender parity is also evident in the African Union, especially at the top positions of the AUC, and Africa's women gender leadership is noticeable. Within the African Union, we have a solid body of strong texts aimed at women empowerment. Of course, some important improvements need to continue, but a lot of work has been done, and we believe that we are on the right track. Now, just for at this moment, let me conclude with some key points to focus the discussion and to reflect the collective African commitment to achieve social protection. The discussions that were held in Cairo in the pre-CSW 63 ministerial meeting focused on guiding principles for social protection, access to public service and sustainable infrastructure, and on strengthening the policy, the legal and the institutional environment. They also focused on transforming public service for gender equality and women's empowerment. These issues and many more are present in a document that has been adopted and which reflects the rich discussions that have taken place and highlighted as well the key priorities that were reflected in this meeting. And once again, let me thank you for organizing this. We're very happy to have been your partners in it, and we look very much forward to the further comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Khan. I was so excited when you referred to our continental commitments to gender equality, like the solemn declaration on gender equality, the Maputo Protocol. And I was wondering, when that road is being fixed, when we are doing the water services, the technology, how many female engineers are going to be on the table? How many women entrepreneurs are going to get the big contracts? How many are going to be in the value chain of the business, so that we are not just looking at women walking on the roads, but we are looking at women co-creating the infrastructure and being part of the knowledge of that infrastructure. I'm very excited for your chairmanship of the African Union and already from your statement on how we translate those values into practical and tangible. I'm very excited. Can we just give another round of applause? I'd like to invite the permanent representative of Finland to the United Nations, Your Excellency Mr. Kai Kure, if I pronounced correctly. Even if my name is a longer spelling, yours is a shorter one, pronunciation is always very respectful, so I hope I didn't mutilate your pronunciation. I had the opportunity to come to your country many times, to work closely with Madam Binta Diop here, with your government, and to ride the train from Helsinki to Tampere. And it takes very quickly runs. And stayed at Helga Hotel, owned by the Young Women's Christian Association. So just feeling, and Tampere mayor was a woman. So I was very excited to just see where you are in terms of gender equality. And I was also intrigued when I read the first draft of the negotiation, the draft text of these negotiations, which was talking about walkways, the right to walk in path. I think as African women, we walk a lot. So maybe the infrastructure issue responds to our lots of walking, but also the issue of urbanization is important. But anyway, that was just a reflection in terms of my own experience with your country. Could you kindly share with us what are some of the good practices and strategies that could be in the design of financing and implementation, and also evaluation of gender-responsive social protection? What could that look like? What has been your experience? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Maybe we can come to an agreement that you don't try to pronounce my last name and I don't try to pronounce your last name. But you hit my soft spot, since I am from Tampere, and I can recognize the environment you just described. So I was very glad to hear that you have visited my hometown, and you have also met our former mayor, who's actually running for parliament in a couple of weeks' time. But indeed, you might wonder why this Finnish guy is sitting here with all these African rock stars behind the table, and it is not a random choice. We have had a long and deep cooperation with the African Union, with the Department of Social Affairs. Of course, we are also very committed partners of UN Women. And what I thought today, this afternoon, very briefly give you some examples of the social innovations which have helped Finland to develop from a poor rural agrarian society into one of the perhaps most advanced societies today. And there are some social protection innovations that have made it possible for Finnish women to participate in full in the labor markets and political life as actively as the men do. And most of these are funded by a broad-based and progressive income tax system. Over the decades, the progressive realization of the universal right to social protection has been advanced through a range of measures. And these include public support to family planning, maternity and parental counseling, and mother and child nutrition and health monitoring at local clinics, and paid maternity and parental benefits and leaves. From the point of view of parents' work careers, it is important that there is a law that gives them the right to return to the same job after the delivery and parental leave. In other words, the employer has no right to dismiss a young woman if she gets pregnant. Nor has the principal teacher or any teacher the right to dismiss a pupil from the school due to pregnancy. In addition, the affordable, good quality public child daycare system is one of the most important public services that allows parents to combine full-time jobs and good parenthood. This contributes also to the relatively low gender pay and pension gap in Finland. Of course, it is important to highlight the investment we have made in early childhood education. In Finland, all children under school age have a subjective right to ECEC, which stands for Early Childhood Education and Care, should their parents so decide. The municipalities are responsible for arranging the ECEC service for the quality and supervision. The ECEC in Finland is based on an integrated approach to care, education and teaching, the so-called educare model. Learning through play is also essential. The system gives all children an equal start in life and enables working parents to combine work and family responsibilities. It is therefore an equalizer in our society in every aspect. So these were just a couple of highlights, and I think from the previous speaker we came from a kind of a big infrastructure approach to a more social and family approach, and maybe later on, if there's a chance, I can also, in a few words, explain the cooperation we have in this field with the African Union. But thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for touching a soft spot for me around education as a public service, and especially for girls who may get pregnant, get into marriage, who due to circumstances are dropped out of school. Girls never drop out of school, they are dropped out of school by circumstances, by context. When we say girls drop out, we are stigmatizing the girls and blaming them, but essentially you are introducing a concept and enabling us to say girls are dropped out of school, and the basic social protection is to ensure that we don't drop girls out of school, and if they do, we have an opportunity to give them a second chance in life. And for Africa, this speaks to the thousands and millions of girls who experience child marriage and teenage pregnancy, and where we need to continue to have re-entry for them to go back to school. So thank you so much for that point, and indeed, without meddling into your own politics, my best wishes to former Mayor Anna Kaiser Ikonen. Thank you so much. Another round of applause. My own sister, Dr. Pumzile Mlambo-Nyuka. This is a Friday. We've seen you way before the start of CSW. You've been in many panels, in many spaces. What was touching for me was to see you sit on the floor with the girls and the women in our Nanga, in our space with the girls. Some of them had no phone, and some might have had a phone but which cannot download this app for CSW. They could not speak the languages of the United Nations, but they speak their language within which they express their dignity and their human rights, and you listened, you interacted, you are here. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you. And as we invite you to speak, I'd like for you to share with us, how do you see the theme of this 63rd Commission on the Status of Women enabling us to advance the gender responsiveness of social protection, public service and infrastructure, but really grounded within the ethos of the SDGs and how it aligns with Agenda 2063, because for us in the African Union, it is Agenda 2060. And therefore, how can the United Nations?
Thank you so much. I hope the chairperson of the AU can see that we are making these things really connect. The Agenda 2030 and 2063 both explicitly acknowledge the importance of social protection systems, public service and sustainable infrastructure. And I don't think it's too hard to see why that is the case. Because on one hand, we need the infrastructure on the continent in order to make the continent and its people resilient. Without infrastructure, which we need from birth to death, we will not be in a position to achieve the ambitious goals that we have for ourselves. We have a young population. We need infrastructure, education, more than any part of the world. We need energy infrastructure, which is still lacking behind, because our own growth and development is not possible without reliable energy. We need clean water, because it is critical for us to keep our people healthy. And of course, water is also important for industrial usage. But we also need to make sure that we have a safety net for our people, because we have many who cannot fend for themselves, who depend on the public services because they cannot afford private care. So the combination of social protection as a safety net and infrastructure for resilience means that we're giving our people actually an opportunity to leapfrog. If we fragment these two, we may take with one, give with one hand and take with another. And that is why our public policy makers need to understand how we connect these. In addition, we need a gender lens, so that we can see that when we connect these thematic areas, we also are clear about how this will change the lives of women. There has been a lot of efforts by many African countries to address these issues, and that is why we saw a significant increase in the uptake of girls' education and enrollment. We also saw an increase in the availability of services for maternal health care. These are all efforts to balance these important areas. But according to ILO World Social Protection Report of between 2017 and 2019, 45% of people in the world have access to effective social protection. In Africa, only 18% have access to effective social protection. So we have some catching up to do. The same report also says that mothers with newborn babies who have access to maternity benefits in the world are 41% on average, that is, and in Africa it is 16%. So our efforts can be, amongst others, targeted to closing these specific gaps that already exist and are well researched. We also noticed that the efforts of the African countries have been very much targeted to non-contributory and non-contributing members of society who do not have employment, who therefore in many cases are not covered by the labor laws of those countries, who are likely when they retire not to have pension because they would not have been part of a pension scheme to which they have contributed, who do not have medical aid. In a continent where we have had to deal with the burden of an array of illnesses, it has been important that we address the needs of the people who are non-contributors to this social system. But it also means that those of us who are earners have to be much more generous than we are sometimes. Because the ability for us to provide the support system for the bulk of the people of the continent who are not yet able to support themselves means that we're creating a larger number of people in the future who will be able to shoulder the continent. So, to whom, what's the saying? To whom that much has been given, yeah, so pay people. I also want to touch on the importance of consulting and including women and girls when infrastructure as well as social protecting services and policies are designed, because women and girls, they know best about what their needs are. Not only does inclusion enable us to respond more appropriately, it also helps us to create women and girls who have the capacities and the skills to provide leadership and to be the people that will deliver these services in their communities. We recognize that the provision of these services requires a lot of input from governments. That is why we've highlighted the public services. But that must never be understood to mean that there isn't a role for the private sector. So there is room and a role for private sector, public sector partnerships in the provision of these services. It is also important for us to make sure that our public sector does not evade the payment of fair tax, and sometimes they can even be more generous in order to help us address the gaps. It is important that we have a systematic way to address the issue of illicit capital outflows, because these are some of the domestic resources that makes this job to be very difficult for many governments, because there's a leakage and an outflow of the much needed resources by the cabinet. So there's a direct connection between illicit capital outflows and the lack of infrastructure and social protection in many countries. We have had the privilege as UN Women to work with the governments of Cameroon, Niger, and Senegal, and the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, where we have supported programs to mainstream gender hygiene and sanitation into public policies, and we've learned a lot from that experience. It has led to ensuring that the needs of women and girls in sanitation and hygiene are being integrated into the policies, laws or regulations and teaching curricula. In Niger, for instance, menstrual hygiene management is now explicit in the program of the Ministries of Hydraulics and Sanitation. We would like to encourage sharing of lessons between and amongst countries within Africa and beyond Africa, because our observation is that when that happens, we all are able to fast track our responses to the needs that we've identified, because we do not have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from what already exists, what works and what doesn't work. And I'm hoping that while we are here during the CSW, this is exactly what we are doing. Exchanging, experiencing, learning from each other, and we'll leave here much stronger and better prepared to serve the continent. Thank you.
Of education. The schools are occupied by armed groups who prevent them to access schools. So that needs to end. I think that's why one of the mechanisms of AU, the African Union Center for Girls and Women Education, AU-CFR, spearheaded the development of a mechanism for regular reporting on the situation of girls and women, and looking into also teaching and learning environment, the safety and security of schools, the education system. And also, I think, which is important by linking it to this year's theme, the extent to which refugees are mainstreamed into local education system. And that is a great strategy that AU is implementing. Our refugees are at home, children have to be at school, and we need to integrate them in society. I think to restore the dignity of women, I think programs at the AU have been put in place, and I can, together with the UN system. When we were in Chad, we visited with UNFPA, South Sudan with UNFPA. We visited one-stop center. It reminded me the one-stop center in Rwanda, which address the issues of violence of women, like psychological support, legal services, so the women can stay in one place and get all the support that are necessary for them to restore their dignity. So let me maybe come back to the issue of UN Resolution 1325, because this is one of the key instruments at the international level to implement the 3 pillars, which is protection of women, especially during war. How do we make sure that our soldiers, our boys that we deploy, the peacekeepers and others, are taking care of the civilian rather than impacting on their life negatively. The issue of participation of women, like within the mediation process, and that's why we have also FemWise, and participation is not just being invited at the table, but being part and parcel in that. And we also recognize the fact that we have also, in the participation recently, have the Africa Women Leaders Network that are also, because we look at through all system of governance, how women and youth can participate. So 1325 is also an African instrument. It came out of the Namibia, and I see here the Minister of Namibia. We have the good instrument for that. It's coming from Africa, which provides the gender equality and women empowerment into the whole process of peace building. So I think this week I here launched the Continental Result Framework, which is really focusing on the implementation, because we have it in the Maputo Protocol, 1325, the Solemn Declaration have been mentioned, but it's really implementation that we need to put in place. Right now, 23, and they told me recently, even 25 national action plan have been adopted by our member state in Africa. The first continent, we have a highest number of 1325. What I found when I was in DRC, and I'm here quoting the minister who has developed and adopted the second generation of 1325, Madam Minister, and to promise to put it in the national budget of your country. We need to applaud that it is not others only funding it, but it's owned by Africans, and we make sure that we present it to our parliament in the structure of the parliament and put it in the budget, the national budget. And DRC has shown that they are committed to the implementation. We have also adopted several programs, as I said, for the issue of refugee. Let's just talk about the Silencing the Gun, which is one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And I think it's very much aligned with the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Agenda. And this is why women have also to fight to be the one to lead the developmental agenda of the continent as well. So let me also say that 2 days ago, we had the opportunity here during CSW, and this is where it's happening all the time. Edie, it is great that leading this conversation in CSW after Egypt, but bringing our voices and the face, but the African agenda in the core of the Commission on the Status of Women. We congratulate you for that. Africa is, how do you say? Africa is rising. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I had the opportunity to launch the Continental with the Gender Director, the Continental Gender Strategy, which is a great tool that will support our member states to reduce the gender gap in our continent. We hope that Egypt will lead us in this implementation. It is a great tool, it's a great agenda, and I'm sure that being the chair for this year, we will have more than Rwanda or Senegal to have 50-50 in the parliament, but it will be throughout Africa. So we can see from above that Africa have a lot of instruments. We have a lot of strategy, policy, and framework that also address the vulnerability by women. But what we need now is with the African member states, with the support of the UN, with the women's group, we can work toward the implementation. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Madam Diop, for those strong recommendations and for giving us the frameworks with which we are moving this agenda forward. I would like to come to you, my sister, the Executive Director of the Bank of Industry, Ms. Adeneji. Where's the money? How do we partner with private sector? We must resource, we must enable. What is the business model? What is the financing matrix that we need? Over to you.
Thank you very much. And also thank you I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me into this very, very exciting discussion. As you know, from my background, working with the Bank of Industry, I certainly will be bringing how government policy has responded or pulled together the idea of social protection as a safety net, infrastructure to provide resilience, and looking at the gender lens and rolling all of that together. And what have we done as Bank of Industry? Just by way of introduction, the Bank of Industry is a development finance institution in Nigeria. We are government owned, so we are an agency of the government. And what the Bank of Industry has been able to do to sort of combat or address some of these issues. So what the Bank of Industry has been able to do is to develop we have instituted some programs in Nigeria that have tackled certain aspects with specificity. So what has the Bank of Industry done in terms of, making public infrastructure more inclusive? What we've done is, what the Bank of Industry has done is been very creative. We've worked closely with the government of Nigeria, and one of the programs that we implemented was the Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, which basically the government introduced to put money in the hands of what I'll call, to raise people out of poverty, put money in the hands of Nigerians at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, while that program in itself was not gender specific, what we found out was that we did reach more than 50% of our beneficiaries were actually women. And what was the Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program? It basically is a microcredit program of the government of Nigeria, or funded by the government of Nigeria, which the Bank of Industry is executing. And we give loans as small as $30 equivalent to women traders in the markets in Nigeria, and I believe that will be the same in other parts of, in many parts of Africa as well. Markets are very strong and vibrant, so every state you go to, there are markets. There are big markets, there are small markets, there are rural markets, and women tend to be the predominant traders in these markets. So this program puts money in the hands of these people, and through a direct intervention. In 3 years of running this program, we were able to give more than 1.5 million unique beneficiaries microcredit loans. And for Nigeria, this was the first time that we would achieve such a number in such a in that frame of time. And how did we do this? We used technology to drive this. So we use technology to, at the back end to ensure that the money goes directly from the government to the beneficiaries, and we try to avoid the typical intermediation that would happen in these kind of programs. And the results or the impact has been it's been very applauded, in the sense that one of the things that we're also able to do is not only to empower the beneficiaries by putting money in their hands, but we're actually able to bring some of them onto the financial infrastructure of the country. So we're able to move some of them from absolute informality to some sense of formality. But what we didn't do was try to take them to big banks and open accounts for them, but we tried to make sure that they begin to have some sort of unique identity. For some of them, we help them to use their mobile phones, even though they're not smartphones. We help them to use their mobile phones to receive funding, to get value on their phones. And through that, there was an increase, in their level of entrepreneurship. And what this does, at least in the absolutely rural locations, that you begin to see enterprise happening. One of the things we also did was we have in Nigeria, because of the Boko Haram insurgencies, we have the IDP camps, and in about 6 states in the north, they're absolutely broken down. So we're talking about post-conflict. They're really, really broken down. I mean, the children, people have lost their homes, children are not going to school, the camps are not even in a particularly good state, But what we did with the IDP camps, we tweaked the product in itself. And we went there and we were able to reduce the amount of loans, because when you're dealing with those conflict areas, they just grow. It's growing a community. There's nothing going on there. So we reduced the amount of loans, we reduced even some of the requirements to register or to onboard them, and we're able to get money into their hands. And sometimes they work in groups so that they can start some small business. So this is something that has really, really been impactful. Where are we now with that in Nigeria? We are still, we're doing what we call the roll-up of the first phase of the program. First phase, we were able to reach 2 million people in total. We are going to phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be very aggressive. We are looking at doing 5 million every year, if we can. Nigeria has the numbers, so we have to be that aggressive. We are looking at using technology to really drive that. We are also looking at creating more gender-specific products under that program, because empower a woman and you empower a community, and if you empower a community, you empower a nation. So we are very focused on that. We have total support from the government. The government is backing all of this. In terms of other things that we're doing, in Nigeria we have other programs that we tag the He for She programs, because we have to bring the men to the table as well to support women, and so we are always looking for more He for She's, and that certainly has also changed the narrative. At the Bank of Industry, we are very deliberate about supporting women, not only women in the rural areas. We support women at all levels and at all sectors, because we think that when more women are empowered and when more women are brought to the table, when more women can participate in decision making, then the difference will be clear. Someone made a joke yesterday at one of the meetings, I think it was in this same room, and he said, we don't have enough, I think it was something in the sense that we don't have enough women leading the world and see all the problems that we have. But that said, the Bank of Industry, we are deliberate about women. We do have a gender desk. So we have a gender program. We have invested in gender funds. that invest in sub-Saharan Africa. We are about to set up a technology and innovation fund, and part of that is going to be gender specific as well, because we just feel that when you empower women, it will be the game changer. So we're very committed to all the SDGs. We are committed to all the. We're not at Cairo. I don't know if Nigeria was at Cairo. I wasn't. So the Bank of Industry wasn't represented at the meetings being referenced. But we are committed to moving things to the next level. We are committed in the decisions that have been taken, and we are committed to taking things forward in whichever way we can collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was even wondering the collateral, whether women need collateral for those loans, what is the interest rates. So maybe your gender desk can look at those dimensions as you go into phase 2. We are under pressure of time, but definitely we need 1 or 2 voices from the audience. I would like to recognize the Honorable Minister of Gender from Namibia, if you have some remarks. So if you have a comment, we'll just recognize you. Or a reflection point.
Yeah. Where's the mic? The node of the mic. Here is the mic. Oh, there.
If you just have one word, one comment.
Thank you very much. By starting, I'm starting with a comment. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me comment on the issue of Mehmet Diop for the special envoy of AUC on the women, peace and security. Just to report, even though the report will come later, that last week, we just passed our national action plan. So I motivated it. Maybe a few men just came in with Venetumbo. You know that she's in love with that 1325 resolution. So we have passed that. We are going to launch it. You will be invited that launch. Then on social protection, that is exactly what should I say? Because my senior have spoken already in his governance. There's nothing I'll mess up because she was the advisor to the Minister of Poverty Eradication. We came up, there's a ministry in Namibia called Ministry of Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare.
Thank you.
We have that ministry which deals with those issues, especially on the issues of food bank, which we are giving to everybody, and we have employed the unemployed youth to make up committees. So I'm here, I'm very much interested to learn from you colleagues also, so that you empower me. Even though we are not number 1, at least we are trying.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had to keep on you, knowing that Namibia also had the Gender Equality Award last year, and we know that you have best practices in the country. We would like to request that in making remarks, just 1 minute, and I'll take a few comments. I see 2 hands there. I see 2 hands there and 2 hands there, and we close. I would like to start with
1 at the back.
And 1 at the back. I would like to start with Luciana and Maria. Luciana from Mexico. And if you can just be quick to the point in 1 minute.
Okay, hello, my name is Mara. She's Luciana. We are 2 young girls from Cancun that are really concerned about the document that is going to be written this year, because until now, the document has 189 references to gender, 56 references to sex, and 27 references to the word reproductive. Women are not sexual objects. This year, the topic is infrastructure and access to public services, which are also issues that favor women's policies, but most of the conferences that I have attended have not touched much of these issues.
Thank you.
This is
1 minute. Thank you. Yes, you want to add 20 seconds quickly, Ed?
Yes. Something that interests me is that access and transport to educational places, which is a big problem in my country. And the truth is that we are not seeing so much budget of the government in that aspect. This great debate of these two organisms had made the whole speech focus on sexual issues, and if they are going to touch on these issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You are raising very important issues. I don't want to limit your comments. And definitely the issues you are raising are crucial around sexual and reproductive health. We know that for Africa we have the Maputo Plan of Action, and therefore is to build on where the continental commitments are and to share the experiences of Mexico. Thank you very much. I would like to end to the point. Okay. You just go straight to the point.
My name is Sarah and I'm from Ghana. I want to talk about pensions. You realize that when we're talking about making it meaningful to women and girls, majority of our women are in the informal sector and they do not have access to pensions. Our women are working till they drop. They are working till they die. We have to look at how we can involve them. If you are making it meaningful to women, then it means that majority of our women in the informal sector, in the agricultural sector, and in the rural communities who do not have access to security and pensions. And so let's look at how we can involve them.
So what are the models? What are the models in the informal, when we have informality? What are the models for pensions? Yes, thank you very much. To the point, you just go straight to the point.
Yes, all protocols of that. I'm Caroline Nakuti and I work for Minister of Energy and Mineral Development in Uganda. I just wanted to share some of the tools that we can use for social protection in the infrastructure project. These are livelihood restoration programs. We also have community development action plans. We have resettlement action plans. We also have environment and social impact assessments. And all these programs are tailored towards facilitating issues like health, education. So it's really very important that we focus on these tools. Because for us in the energy sector, for refugees, you're mainstreaming education, for us, you're mainstreaming energy, and it's also important that we are actually disseminating energy-saving technologies that actually improves on the health of the women through reduction of pollution.
Thank you so much. We get at the back. And as you run with the microphone there, you're talking about impact assessments. So it will be very interesting to look at the impact from the panel, to look at some of the big investments in Africa. What are some of the social impacts, including gender-based violence at times which we see in this side? Yes, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Saulo, I'm from Liberia. I want to know something about the health and welfare. From our other speaker, he said that a lot of girls go to school while pregnant in high school pupils. And for my country, Liberia, I see a lot of girls not being in school, they are dropped out of school because they are pregnant. So I think that we should get our government involved in these things. We shouldn't just make the law, but we should enforce the law. Because this is one circumstance at the CSW. Many of the laws, maybe they are not enforced when we go back.
Thank you so much for raising the issue of accountability. Implementation, resourcing, accountability are critical. I would like to, I promised the two hands here, and just 30 seconds. We are under a lot of pressure. We have to really run. Just your comment, we'll do the storytelling later. Just
Jessica Sanyega is my name. I work for WaterAid. And I want us to reflect on that word access. When we talk about access, for instance, access to water, we have to look at issues of quality. We have to look at issues of distance. When you talk about access to sanitation facilities, it's one thing to have the sanitation facility, but it's another thing to ensure that the sanitation facilities cater for our sanitary pads. The waste is also well managed. So let's reflect more on what exactly we mean by access to social services.
Thank you so much. And yes, my sister, and quickly.
Okay, my name is Yabisi George, and I'm from Nigeria, and unfortunately she's out of here. Okay, it's okay. I just wanted to find out that it's very important if NGOs can be more involved in the things that are happening in Nigeria, because Nigeria has been rated the third poorest country in Nigeria, in the world, and of course they have over 17 million children that are malnourished. And so it is very, very overwhelming for the government. So if they can create rooms like the Empower project, the social protection project that we're doing in Nigeria, that we were trying to reach out to people, what is the sustainability for this thing?
Sustainability,
because it's very important in partnership with the NGOs.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I'd like to turn to the panel. And oh my goodness, a range of issues have been raised. The African discourse is positioning infrastructure and public service first, and then building social protection within a context of also unemployment and informality of our sector. So I would like to start with Madam Binta Diop. Any last word, any single commitment which you would say this would be my #1 recommendation moving forward? Just in a minute.
I was in northern Nigeria taking up the last one, visiting the IDP and the impact of Boko Haram in the region. But I have seen also the women being resilient. But the partnership that the UN Women, partnering with the governor, partnering with the government, partnering with the civil society, the women's group, having a common position within the IDP camps, but beyond. I think when we talk about sustainability, is how together with the African Union and other actors, we are able to put our resources together with the population, which are the ones that are resilient, to support them in their own solution, in their own program. Just to add on what you have said. But we need to duplicate and multiply and make sure that throughout that region of Nigeria, Cameroon, and where Boko Haram is, being a threat to us, all of us.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, Mr. Kai. So we reached a quick agreement that we will not pronounce each other's surnames.
Yeah,
I wish the negotiations were this easy. So as you listen to the comments, any reflections on any of the issues?
Yes, very brief reflection. I think all the comments coming from the audience were somehow related to public services. You have sanitation, you have school transport, you have health, you have education. And in order to be available, these services require taxes. So you need to have a tax basis and tax structure. So I would like to close maybe by saying that not the diamonds are girls' best friends, but taxes are girls' best friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pumzile Mlambo-Nyuka. You have listened to a range of comments, questions. Can you just reflect on one that speaks strongly to the issue that you still want the member states to reflect on as we continue with CSW?
Yeah, I'll just reflect on something we did not speak about.
Yes, please.
Which is connectivity and technology, which is critical and essential infrastructure needed by the continent, which especially has such a large number of young people. We have in our countries universal service agreement funds, which are the funds that governments collect from telecoms company when they get their license. They pay into a fund that governments keep, and that fund is meant to be invested in assisting communities, government, to invest in closing the digital divide. In most of our countries, we did a study as UN Women, the money, millions are just sitting, not being used to invest in providing the infrastructure or training, etc. We would love to work with you to spend that money on women and girls, African girls who code. ensuring that you train teachers to be effective teachers in this area, etc. I think that it is really serious that this money is not being used for that. So it's not new, it's not money you have to go to look for. It already exists, and we can show you, we can share with you the information and the data that we've collected in about, I think, 30 African countries.
Thank you so much. When I hear about money like...
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And just to let me say too, I've heard, as has been pointed out, what is the impact of these major infrastructure projects? That was a question, I believe, from our sister from Uganda. And this goes to the importance. When you are planning such projects, take into account not only the environmental impact assessment that is now becoming the norm, but also the social impact assessment. And this is extremely important because it relates directly to the livelihoods that could be impacted. So this is the first point. The second point, and it seems that whenever you're discussing, at the end of the day, it's the money, you know, that really makes the sense. Whether it's a girl's best friend or not. But let us not lose sight from what we're taxing. Do we tax what takes place in Africa? Then we do that. And this links in with what has previously been raised about illicit financial flows. At the African Union, we've already, a number of times, there's been a commission headed by the former president of South Africa that highlighted this very important issue, illicit financial flows. If the big multinationals function and make profit in Africa, that's where they should be taxed, not anywhere else. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Africa is bleeding.
It has been a very enlightening afternoon, and we are taking, obviously, a lot of takeaways from us. But what I remember about the SDGs is that it reminds us that we must reach those that are furthest left behind. Someone mentioned the informal sector. Many of us, especially on the continent, employ domestic workers in our houses. The majority of domestic workers are women. Yes. Have we ensured that the labor laws in our countries protects domestic workers? Have we ensured that our labor laws in our countries protect agricultural workers? Have we ensured in our countries that those traders in the informal economy are protected by our laws? If we can at least start there. My sister Kumsile talked about solidarity, and I want to emphasize the word solidarity. I am because you are. Let's not forget that as Africans, the spirit of Ubuntu is what will lead us, and that is my message to you today. When we are in comfortable situations in our lives, let us always remember that we can always give a little bit more than what is required, and the world will be a better place, and we will reach those that are left furthest behind. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's now my pleasure to thank you all. I've always wondered this word, those who are left behind. Who is leaving them behind? We should say those who we leave behind. We are the leaders.